How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another exciting episode of 5 albums recently released that you should check out. On the platter for this week, we have 4 albums that were released this past weekend, which is the first weekend of June, and one from 2 weeks ago that time constraints and availability caused me not to get to in the last episode, so consider it a little bit of housekeeping. But with that said, let's get into it. Here are 5 albums recently released that you should check out. And we start off with our first entry with The Bones of a Dying World by If These Trees Could Talk. And this is a kind of brand new piece of turf. We've talked a little bit about post-black metal, but we've not talked about just straight up post-metal or a little bit of prog. And that's what we have here. We've definitely talked about a lot of prog, but post-prog or post-metal is one that has been sort of missed thus far. And this is more of the traditional post-metal or post-rock that you would hear. It's post-metal principally because of the little bit of heaviness that swirls around it. And this is all also instrumental, which gives it an extra kind of echo to it. The very first track, Solstice, which is nearly 8 minutes in length, definitely introduces some of that heaviness right away with some of the very basic riffs that you hear during the first minute of this track. And it's something that sort of crushes your ears the first time that you kind of get into it, because you have this sort of softness that emanates immediately but then transforms into something that has a lot more density to it. And you know that this is going to be a ride that kind of undulates between that heavy side and one that is a lot more beautiful, one that's a lot more melodic, one that has a little bit of that softer idea in mind. Highly recommend that song. I also recommend The Giving Tree, which is track number 7. This 9-track album is one that it's kind of haunting in some ways. It's kind of melancholic, and it's also one that is very relaxing to listen to. If you're looking for a late night album to maybe sort of put your mind at ease while at the same time causing you to, think some big thoughts, that this is an album certainly to check out, and it's a quick listen, even though it's 50 minutes in length plus. And what I mean by that is it's one that definitely doesn't feel like it's length. It's instead one that feels like it's over before you know it, and you're kind of disappointed by that fact because you kind of want more. It's a great album, and I highly recommend it. Entry number 2 is Bases Loaded by the long-standing act, The Melvins. I can't keep that up. You want a band that really seems like they just do whatever they want, don't give a shit, and love what they're doing? That's the way the Melvins certainly seem like they're operating with just about everything that they do, whether it be live shows, whether it be studio albums or EPs or whatever they decide to drop this week. I mean, seriously, these guys are constantly recording, it seems. Just take a look at any discography site and you'll understand what I mean. But this is an album whose main center point is having multiple bassists, multiple percussionists, and drumming. Chris from formerly Nirvana plays accordion on this album. Not the first time he's done that, by the way. He does this on the track Maybe I'm Amused, but he's also done some accordion work with Foo Fighters in the past. If you can believe that, then you should buy that for $1. But at any rate, this album, what's really neat about it is it brings together bassists from groups such as Red Cross, Big Business, of course, current and former members of the Melvins. It brings together some members of the Butthole Surfers. Buzz just has this wide variety of friends that all have ended up being kind of influential in the biz in one way or the other, including one of the members of Mr. Bungle as well. So, pretty nice lineup. So, tracks that I would check out with this one are The Decay of Lying, Planet Destructo. Both of these are longer tracks, so they have a little bit more explorative quality to it. But then you also need to check out their cover of I Want to Tell You, which is an old Beatles track, and then also Shaving Cream, which is a song that's based off of an old jingle that turned into a song from yesteryear, the days of yore. And what I find to be really, really cool, it's the summertime, it's baseball season. They did a cover of Take Me Out to the Ball Game, which sounds really, really cool, somewhat juvenile at times. Just, and by juvenile, I don't mean that they're doing it with their butts or something like that, but the fact that it's kind of just, it has that nice little, adolescent effect where it's good for the whole entire family. I would love to see this be the official way the Take Me Out to the Ball Game is played in Seattle, Washington for the Mariners. I think that'd be really, really cool. This album is not one that is necessarily for everybody. The Melvins can at times be a bit challenging and a bit weird and out there. you're metal fans, you like what's weird and you like what's out there, give this a shot. And really just anytime you want something that's a little bit fun, a little bit out there, and if you're ever in a creative slump, listen to some old Melvins stuff or listen to some new Melvins stuff and just realize that you don't necessarily have to subscribe to a playbook in order to be successful. Up next on our journey, we have The Unknown. It's the brand new album from the Vision Bleak. Yeah, it's whatever. So, the Vision Bleak, this is a really cool album title for them, considering they are a bit of an enigma. They are a bit of an unknown, considering the category that they call themselves is horror metal. What most other folks call them is gothic metal. But they have influences that are far and wide. They have symphonic influences. They do have a little bit of a punk influence, though it's one that you barely hear. They do have influence that is drawn in from folk, even a little bit, and which makes sense considering one of the two members of this project, the two-man project, was formerly in Imperium, which was a really cool band that started off as a black metal group and had some doom elements and some folk elements, and slowly but surely turned into this neo-folk project, and wow. It was a huge transition, and I'm sure that it took some people off guard, but the music was very, very well done, so it shouldn't really matter. Getting back to The Unknown here, though, you are kind of slapped by this album right out of the gate, punched right by it from Wolf to Peacock, considering this is the strength of these riffs and some of the repetition of these riffs to sort of emanate its power, either that or maybe try to create a little bit of uneasiness, a little bit of an arrest, is very nicely done. And each of these tracks has a certain symphonic element to it, even if it's very recessed. It's, in a way, it feels like a chapter to a story, either that or this is similar to a collection of stories like you would see from H.P. Lovecraft, either that or maybe Stephen King, where each track feels like it's sort of telling its own little tale, or it's weaving its own little chapter within a larger piece of musical literature, which is kind of a really awesome thing. And it sort of follows with the Kindred of the Sunset and going into The Unknown. If you notice that these are these longer songs, these 5, 6.5 minute tracks, but they're keeping your attention considering the way the music progresses is always a bit unique. It's not one that feels like it has the opportunity to grow stale, and it's one that has enough energy that whenever it opts to sort of go the other way and soften itself, it's not one that is met with immediate reproach. It's one that's met instead with a little bit of curiosity, and it kind of helps the overall flow of the record. Moving on to the second half, this is one where that softer side, or that more foreboding side, the one that maybe makes your hair on your arm stand up a little bit more, that shows a little bit more. And whenever we get to the final 3 cuts on this disc, excluding the deluxe bonus tracks, that's whenever it starts to feel like a larger narrative sort of coming together, just by the way in which these are put together. Whether or not that's true, it really remains to be seen, and really in some cases is up to the imagination. But I like the way this album flows. I like the way that this disc really is unafraid to just sort of go in some bold directions and just let these collective influences breathe by themselves, as opposed to sort of closing them off. So this is one that's unique, and I think this is one that if a lot of you were to happen to explore just on a whim, you'd grow to actually really like these guys. So give them a sample. There may be some light outside now, but we are staying within the darkness. We are staying within Cough with Let Them Pray, the brand new album from these masters of sludge metal, which I don't believe we've talked about on one of these episodes yet. Correct me if I'm wrong. Last year we had an album in Brothers of the Sonic Cloth, their self-titled release, that really captivated masses. It captivated audiences, those who were daring enough to sample it. And it was able to do so by just experimenting around with some dark noise and some sludgy sound, going slow and being damn good at it. Cough is a group that has a reputation already. This is not their first release. This is their first album in 6 years. So a lot of fans are happy to see this. But throughout this 67-minute, 8-track affair, you can definitely tell why Cough established a reputation prior to their, 6-year departure. This is an album that just screams hate based off of how the riffs are compiled and how these songs just sort of sludge literally on by. We have multiple 10-minute tracks on this disc, Look especially at Dead Among the Roses, as well as Possession, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But the opener, Haunter of the Dark, reminds me a lot of that Brothers of the Sonic Cloth album from last year. The way it pulls you into this album, it makes you want to hear more, and it's a track that's actually kind of addicting, even though it's one that's very brooding. Wow, this is a massive release, but from the very first opening moment of Haunter of the Dark, all the way to the very last moment of Still They Pray, it's one that really brings you in. Ever lost an hour due to like a blackout or something like that, and you wondered what happened? This album feels that way. It's 67 minutes. You'd think that you would recognize that, but no. The 3 or 4 times that I've jammed out to this album, well, I felt like I've only lost 20 minutes of my life only to look at the clock and realize it's been a whole hell of a lot longer. This is solid work, this is awesome work, and this is something I recommend to you guys. Check this out. We conclude this week's episode with our housekeeping. Our housekeeping is Gruesome with Dimensions of Horror. Didn't have it available to me for last week's episode. Now I do. Want to talk about it. Want to talk about this band. Didn't review Savage Land last year, and a lot of people were shocked by that. I'm shocked by that, but I just didn't get around to it. I was stupid back then. I'm still stupid, but I was stupider back then. Really, really solid release. Fantastic, fantastic work. And this includes Matt Harvey from Exhumed, so you know that there's going to be some quality in there. But what I like about Gruesome, and which you can see on Dimensions of Horror on this 6-track EP, kind of gives you a taste of what they're all about, is that they have a plan in mind. They have something that they really want to do. They have an aesthetic that is within their collective brains as a band, and they execute it. And that aesthetic is early days of death metal, which we've seen this before. We've seen that with 6 Feet Under, their album from last year. Definitely felt like it was trying to resurrect some of the early 1990s era of death metal, but they failed miserably. Gruesome instead is opting to go back to some of the earliest tomes of the band Death. So think about albums such as Scream Bloody Gore, and you kind of know where we're coming from. Leprosy is another good, I guess, litmus test for what this is all about. But what I love about these tracks is that not a single one of them is above the 4-minute mark in length. But they feel like they pack in so much, and even if some of the introductions, or even if some of the basic patterns that you hear in the songs, some of the basic rhythms, sound a little bit similar throughout, each track really goes its own way and goes its own place. There's enough riffing in here to really make each song unique and give it that atmosphere of total frenzy. There's a lot of that speed and aggression on this disc, not to mention also on their debut from last year, that certainly promotes that they have a great sense of songwriting, and the aesthetic is also one that they are bringing to the production bench as well, considering this doesn't feel like a 2016 album. It feels like it's from the era because it doesn't have that dense wall of sound effect. There's instead a little bit left to the imagination, almost like it was purposefully produced that way. And if it was, then really, really cool idea. Really execute that vintage flavor. Love this. You should too. Check it out. And as one final note before I sign off, there was another album that was released this past weekend that some people wanted me to talk about, and it's the brand new one from COMBICHRIST. Now, I don't have that on this episode, and it's not going to be on a housekeeping for a future episode. And the reasoning for that is very simple. COMBICHRIST is a band that I don't know very much about. COMBICHRIST is also a band that whenever I've listened to stuff, I've not been all of that thrilled with it. So that's just sort of more of a personal opinion or a personal taste thing. And I would much rather on these episodes reflect things that I'm sort of positive about, either that or not let that bias sort of get into the way. I would rather use this opportunity to reflect on some things that I really enjoyed listening to this past weekend to you that I feel that you should examine. Now, if you're a fan of COMBICHRIST, then definitely examine this disc. If you are a fan of, I guess, agrotech, whatever they want to call themselves, it's basically heavy metal that has some hard rock, that has some electronica, that has some this and that in it. I mean, there is a big, big window here. If you like Rammstein, you might like these guys. Do check out the album. Like I said, just not for me. So that's really all there is to that. But there you have it, 5 albums that were recently released that you should examine, and a bonus one because I'm a giving guy. My name is CoverKillerNation. Join me next week where we will talk about 5 more albums that you should check out that were released the past weekend. And if you need to check out any previous episodes or want to skip out any previous episodes, there's a playlist now, so you should certainly examine that. This is hopefully going to be done every week or every other week. So get on board. I'll talk to you guys next time. I'm CoverKillerNation, signing out.